Sometime in the 1980s, Satoshi Tajiri founded Game Freak as a magazine company, published by gamers, for gamers. And then in 1989, Game Freak was retooled to be a game development company. Game Freak is most well known for their series Pocket Monsters, or Pokémon for short. And just like every other piece of media that's out there, Pokémon has had a lot of concept art. But personally, I'm more interested in seeing the concept art from Generation 1. So in this video, we're going to be taking a deep dive at some of the early beta Pokemon artwork, sprites, and more. Well, for starters, Pokemon's name wasn't even Pokemon yet. In fact, its original name was Capsule Monsters, not to be confused with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Season of the same name. The first piece of concept art we're going to show right now. Right above the early logo, you can see two unidentified early Pokemon battling each other. Now, according to a source I once saw, these are actually prototype versions of the Pokemon Gengar and Nidorino. This could most likely be the reason as to why Gengar and Nidorino are seen battling each other in the opening of every Gen 1 game, as well as their Gen 3 remakes. Now let me ask you a little question. Who do you think the very first Pokemon ever created was? You might think it's Pikachu simply because he's the mascot of the Pokemon series. But, surprisingly, you'd be wrong. Maybe a few of you even guessed Bulbasaur because he's first in the Pokédex. Well, it was actually Rhydon. Now, that may sound a little random, but early on, most Pokemon designs were based on the traditional kaiju monsters, and Rhydon fit right in with them. Or at least he did until Game Freak decided to make some more cuter looking Pokemon, like Clefairy, for example. Except Clefairy didn't look like this initially. Instead, we had this, which I personally think doesn't look as cute as the finalized one. Another Pokemon that existed at this point in development was Lapras. Lapras looks mostly the same, except for the fact that it's got some kind of horn on its nose, which is a contrast to the final design, which has the horn on its forehead like a unicorn. In fact, at one point in development, it was considered for each Pokemon to serve a unique and individual purpose. These purposes included Rhydon being used to lift heavy things, Lapras ferrying people across the water, and as for Clefairy, well, it was just a pet. I personally think the reason that this was cut early on was because there was going to be over 100 different Pokemon in the first generation anyway, so coming up with purposes for all of them would have been kind of difficult. And now we're going to take a look at the Gen 1 concept art. First up, we've got this. This appears to be Slowbro fighting against something that looks like a cross between Ghastly and Coughing. Directly below this is a battle between Blastoise and Staryu. What's really interesting is that Blastoise does not have his iconic water cannons yet. This is an early version of the battle screen, and there's a lot here that we need to go over. First of all, these two Pokemon are nowhere in the final game at all. Their names are Godzillant and Gorillamo, respectively. They were based on Godzilla and King Kong. And second, the POV of the battles is different, as it actually shows the two Pokemon facing each other. Whereas in the final game, the POV is moved to behind the left Pokemon, so it almost looks like you're the trainer who's commanding the Pokemon in battle. Although, oddly enough, there's actually a knockoff Pokemon game called Robopon, which used the original beta POV for the battle screen. Over here we have what looks like either a Poke Center or a Pokemart. But if you look in the bottom corner, you will actually notice that it says a hotel. Does this mean that originally Pokemon centers were going to be hotels for Pokemon to just chill and have room service? I don't know, that's just my guess. Over here we have a trainer out on their journey, and then right below that we have the same trainer again preparing for bed. So does this mean the hotels would have been for humans too? Okay, here comes a really cool one. This right here appears to be a trainer and Rhydon exploring a cave. Again, Rhydon was the first Pokemon ever created, so of course he's going to be in a lot of these. On the bright side, at least this cave didn't have any annoying Zubats yet.
You take that back!
However, this cave did have something a lot more interesting, and I'm about to show you. If we go down to the bottom of this piece of concept art, you can actually see an unidentified baby Pokemon hatching out of an egg. But everybody knows that hatching was not a thing until Generation 2. Well, my guess is that Game Freak didn't have the technical limitations to have Pokemon hatching out of eggs at the time. But I don't know, that's just me. And now, ladies and gentlemen, prepare for something absolutely interesting. Here it is. This right here is a New Year's card featuring Kangaskhan and Exeggutor. The main kicker here being the fact that this was celebrating the new year of 1993, which was 3 whole years before Pokemon officially came out. This means what you are looking at right now is the oldest official publicly released piece of Pokemon artwork ever. But if you want the truth, I don't know why they decided to show this to the public even though Pokemon wasn't out yet, but hey, whatever works, right? Now, we're going to take a look at some early Pokemon sprites. And I'm warning you, these are even uglier than the ones from the original Japanese Red and Green, which are the ones on your screen right now, by the way. These right here are the sprites that we're going to be taking a look at. This first guy is actually an early version of Ivysaur. This was made back before the concept of evolution had been conceived. This right here is Lickitung. He looks mostly the same except for the fact that his tongue actually splits at the end like an actual lizard or salamander or something. This guy doesn't really resemble any Generation 1 Pokemon in particular, although I think this guy eventually became Tyranitar from Generation 2. This appears to be an early back sprite for Nidoking. I mean, who else could it be besides Nidoking? Or it could be Nidorino standing up on 2 legs, we may never know. Over on the left is an early design for Spearow. As you can see, he looked a lot chubbier. The one on the right more closely resembles the Spearow that we ended up getting in Pokemon Red and Green. And here's it again, but with Clefairy. The one on the left we've already seen earlier in this video, but this is it in sprite form. And the one on the right more closely looks like the Clefairy that we ended up getting in the end. This guy looks troubled. My guess is that this was the original design for Seal. He honestly looks a lot less joyful than what we ended up getting. This over here is an unused deer or moose Pokemon that I guess was meant to be an early version of Stantler, also from Generation 2. This may look like a very lazy design as it's just a balloon with a face drawn on it. But what if I told you this is actually Jigglypuff? Don't believe me? Jigglypuff's category is quite literally the balloon Pokemon. And finally, we have this angry shark-looking thing with an arrow for a fin. Or maybe that's his tail. My guess is that this is an early version of Sharpedo, who's from actually Generation 3. There's a lot more early kooky sprites that I could show, but honestly, if I did, we'd be here all day. So, I think these are good enough for now. All in all, it's amazing when a project is in development and when it comes out it looks nothing like the concept art. It's a totally different thing from what we end up getting in the end. And speaking of the end, it just about happens to be the end of the video. So, don't forget to like and subscribe and all that other stereotypical YouTuber stuff. And I'll see you all soon. Have a great day.